We all know what's going on out there right now, and plenty of people are feeling it. Fuel prices are doing a number on a lot of truckies, and if you're out there driving for a living, running your own truck, or keeping freight moving, chances are you're definitely feeling it. And it's not just what happens when you pull up at the bowser. Pressure like this has a way of, getting into everything, into your head, your sleep, your patience, things at home. Well, all of these things, to be honest. So we thought we'd have a proper chat about it, a real conversation about what people are dealing with, what might actually help, and where to turn if things are starting to feel a bit heavy. G'day, I'm Shane Jacobson, and this is How You're Travelling from Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds. Today, I'm joined by Truckie, the wonderful Heather Jones, who's back with us on the program, and Healthy Head psychologist Arthur Papagiannis for a special episode we're calling Under the Pump. So let's get into it. Arthur, I've got to start by asking, did I get your surname right? Did I say it right?
You were bang on.
I was bang on?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's good.
Which is a surprise. Don't often get it right.
And Heather, I'm going to assume I got Jones right.
Pretty cool here.
Pretty cool.
Pretty good.
Well, thank you both. We've had you on our show before, so thank you so much for coming back. And I think we all know while we're here, as I said in that intro, if there was ever a time for us to have kind of, I guess, if an emergency break glass kind of a podcast, it's now, with the pressure that all of our transport workers are under. And I do want to start by saying, because, for everyone that's listening to this podcast, I've said this a few times over the last few weeks, but I've always known how wonderful our transport workers are and our truck drivers, but now Australia knows how important they are. And we've said for such a long while, and we all know this, that truck drivers do keep Australia moving. It's an expression that's been said before and heard many times, but now aren't we proving it? So first, I guess I'm going to start with you, Heather, to ask from where you sit as one of our wonderful truck drivers, what's the mood out there right now?
It's not good, Shane. Every single time we stop or catch up, that's the first conversation is fuel. How much are you paying? How much longer do you think you can keep the wheels turning? Any ideas? I think it's really tough out there for everyone.
How hard's it hitting you at the moment?
Really hard. In just 28 days from the beginning of March to the end, my fuel has gone up 81%. So even though you put levies on, you're sort of paid 28 days later. So that tiny bit that was put on 28 days ago, you're sort of pulling out of your reserves and watching your bank account sort of go down quite rapidly. Even though you're putting your fuel levy on, it won't catch up until, I don't know, probably May. So, yeah, I count 1,600 litres, just a little bit over that in my truck. On the 2nd of March, it cost me $2,640 to fuel up. Yesterday, it cost me $5,120 to fuel up.
My God.
So, those prices aren't sustainable for anybody, whether you're a large business, medium or small business.
Arthur, I'm going to jump to you. When people are surrounded by this sort of pressure, and at the moment now it's every day, and it has been for a while, what does that start doing to people mentally? I mean, I know we're talking about prices at bowsers and all that kind of stuff, but what does that do to people mentally, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we really start to see the impact from a mental health standpoint. People start to feel the pressure, as Heather's just shared. With that pressure, people start to ruminate a bit more, think a bit more, consume themselves more with what's going on. And we know that can start to have a real adverse impact on the person's mental health and well-being, from feeling a little more anxious, more overwhelmed, tired, irritable, ability to think clearly, just feeling more fatigued in general, but still the mind being active, thinking, how am I going to get through? I mean, I was just hearing what Heather was sharing, and I've gone, oh my goodness, almost a doubling of fuel price, and those things start to play on people's minds and really start to have a bit of a negative impact.
Arthur, to put a kind of point to it, all those things you just said that they're going to be feeling, I guess it's important to point out, they're normal things to be feeling, aren't they? When you're listing those off, they're normal things to feel. That's not an abnormal thing to feel, is it?
No, it's perfectly normal. The way I conceptualize it, what's going on is our modern day threat. This is a threat of some sort. We're still wired in our primitive way of fight, flight. So when we're experiencing things like this, our body starts to respond to that. And all of that is a normal response to what is a very challenging situation, which I would perceive as the threat that the brain's trying to process there.
Heather, what sort of hard calls are people making out there right now just to stay afloat?
Well, I've been contacted quite regularly every day by owner drivers and lots of drivers. Quite a few have already parked up. Had a girlfriend from Brisbane who just started a job over there for a small company a month ago. She was put off last week because they've parked all their trucks up. So it's not, the flow-on effect is people are worried whether they will have a job on Monday. The stress involved with managers and senior managers trying to take this on board and look after all their staff and manage cash flows and everything. So it's not just the small companies, it's right across the board where it's having a really big hit to everyone in the industry.
Heather, I know we spoke a little bit before we press record on this podcast that, and I know you know, and some know that I've got a few trucks as well. Like even I've had to make a call recently because my trucks aren't moving. I've got film trucks. I took insurance down to third party. Put one on laid up cover. It's not moving at all, and I'm hearing a lot of stories from mates in the industry that a lot of people have got rigs on the road and they just can't cover insurance. It's one of the first things they've got to put fuel in the tank. Obviously, all the wheels don't turn, as we know, but the insurance is one of the things they're going, I just can't afford to insure the truck at the moment. So are you hearing that as well?
I am, but that's a bit of a false economy too, because if you can't afford to insure it, then you shouldn't be on the road. You need to talk to your insurance company, and they've got insurance covers that they can actually lower so that you can just have it for theft and fire. We've put one of our trucks on seasonal plates, so we've parked that up. We'll be using that October, November, December. We're just in conversations about putting another one on seasonal plates, just taking that off the road. I think everyone's really having a look at every single cost that you can get rid of. We've got storage lockers in Perth that we use for all our tax file papers and our important stuff. We're emptying that this weekend so that that sort of costs us about $10,000 a year just to have that safe storage, so we're getting rid of that. Other people have said, look, if you need to come and park your trucks on the farm, bring them out here so you can get rid of rental fees or yard fees. So I think everyone's having that conversation. So many really beautiful people coming up with solutions and wanting to help us so that we can continue on, because, I know we keep saying this, but without trucks, Australia stops, and I don't think the general public really, really understand that because,
But Heather, I think they're learning it now. I mean, they're learning it the hard way. We didn't want it to go this way, but I think they're understanding it now. Like, and I think they're going to continue to learn more about how much they come into contact with that touched the truck before it got to their house or their workshop or whatever it is they've got. With all these things that are being done, when I say all of these things, some things, even when there's meant to be a fuel levy or some cover stuff there, the truth is a lot of the truck drivers are still wearing the cost up front, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably 3 or 4 months down the track, you'll be, we're wearing that money until it comes up. So it's a real slow trickle if we even get it, because by the time we get it, it's already gone.
Arthur, I've got to ask, when someone's feeling these things that are happening to them and having to make these compromises, and especially when I imagine, well, for me, it's funny because when Heather just said people are moving trucks to having to go to what I would call extraordinary measures, that they, this wasn't on their dance card 6 months ago. Even I've had to move my trucks. I was paying storage and I've moved them literally, as you said, Heather, a gentleman who's got some farming property near where I am has said, you can park them here for free, mate. Now, if that wasn't the kind gesture of a fellow Australian who just gets my plight, then I'd be snookered, right? But Arthur, this stuff's happening kind of without permission and without planning. I know what that felt like to me, having to all of a sudden knee-jerk react. I mean, what would you say happens when people are having these things thrust at them without any control? And also, dare I say it, I don't want to say it, none of us have a crystal ball. And when we look down the road, I mean, truck drivers are used to looking down the road. I can't see these potholes that keep hitting us. And they just turn up and they go clunk hard. So what does that do to a person when you have no control over the circumstances ahead of us?
Yeah, it's a really good point you raise, in that space of uncertainty, feeling like you don't have control really starts to play on people's minds, their mental health, their well-being, because they're constantly trying to work out what's that next move, what do I need to do next, which is fatiguing, tiring, exhausting, having to do that. And that's often what becomes the most challenging part, because you're trying to protect your business, look after yourself through that, but the potholes are constantly appearing in different ways. But what I really like and what I'm hearing as well is just the camaraderie and the support from one another to help each other out in these situations, because it does bring about, that connection piece, and how do we look out for each other as well when things are quite uncertain.
Heather, you're bumping into mates still on the road and obviously talking to them. You've been in the game a very long while. Are you starting to hear these stories of the things that Arthur's talking about? Are you, witnessing people who are having trouble sleeping, who are, I mean, let's be honest, they're taking this home with them. Are you hearing these stories, apart from the conversations you're having about fuel prices and all the obvious impacts? Are you starting to hear people tell their personal stories about how it's affecting them?
Yeah, very, very regularly. And after our toolbox meetings or conversations, I sort of remind people that the Healthy Heads website has got lots of help on it, Beyond Blue, or it can direct you to TX or other places too. But on that website, all those companies or organisations are listed there. So you just go on the website and find something, because, the old saying, a problem shared is a problem halved. I think it's very, very true. And the more you sort of had that conversation, the less it's just encapsulated in your brain, because, we talk about this so often, Shane, don't we, that we're in the truck by ourselves in our own head for 12, 14, 16 hours a day. And those of us that sleep in the truck as well, it doesn't stop. It's 24 hours a day. You're there by yourself, and you really do need someone else's input to sort of to bring you back in focus, because you might think, oh my goodness, there's no way out of here. But there is. You just need to have that conversation and find that place that will give you that help, that will bail you out. Because I think sometimes when we do just live in our head too much, we can't see a way out, and there's always a way out. There always is. We can park the truck up. You can put your repayments on a 3-month hold. All these things are available to us as long as we know what to do. Go and drive for somebody else, or go and have a holiday, or, just take time to really just look at some other things rather than what we're looking at down the barrel every day.
The one thing I'd love people to know is they've done nothing wrong. I know it seems like a simple thing to say, but to forgive them, like if they're looking, I'd hate to think that our drivers are out there looking inward going, how could I have managed this better? What have I done wrong? That they've actually done nothing wrong, that they were sailing so perfectly up until this, presumably for the most part, you know what I mean, that it's circumstances beyond their control. I only say that because I have in the past, in moments, and even recently over a few things, when circumstances are changing in the world, and I'm finding things in business, in some areas like the trucking and everything else, have actually kind of gone down. And I'll be honest, there's a bit of ego and pride in me. I'm not speaking about others. I can only speak for myself. Where you go, I've managed this wrong. I structured this wrong. I did this wrong. How did I not see this coming? And it was my wife that said to me just the other day, she said, you're taking this personally. Of course, you can be angry, you can be disappointed, you can be all those things. But she was hearing me talk about how I thought I could have managed it better. And she said, I think you need to have a think about who you're blaming for this. Feel free to blame the world, but don't blame yourself. And I thought it was a really interesting point. Is there some value in what she's saying, Arthur? I know it doesn't change the circumstance, but I was feeling like I had failed a little bit, because a business that I was in charge of wasn't doing as good as it was moments before. And that thing, that starts at the top and everything else. I did kind of blame, or not kind of, I blame myself a bit. And I was a bit embarrassed that it wasn't, that I hadn't planned for this. Is there some value in what she was telling me? Because it felt better when I heard it.
Yeah, most definitely. And when we're in that place of stress that we're experiencing, our mind does tend to take off. Going to so many different places, from what am I doing, what wrong, worrying, what are what's the world done to me as well, potentially we're within some of that as well. and just finding ways to start to reflect on that and say, hey, what am I in control of here? What is factual and not factual? Because we start to move into that world of worry and possibilities, which creates that anxiety. So that's self-blame. Let's say there's an element of self-blame. Well, where's the evidence for that? We might start to move into that space thinking that, but I'm always asking, where's the evidence for that? And more often than not, there isn't. And then go, okay, can I balance that out a little bit? Why do I feel that I have to say that is my fault, or I'm personally accountable for that, just to bring some perspective to a situation? And I think, Heather, I know you were talking to, that isolation. Well, truckers, we know they're on the road for extended periods of time. Now we've got all of these, stresses, additional stresses that are playing out, which just adds to the complexity of that, and that connection with peers, loved ones, colleagues, are all really helpful things, because Shane, as you were sharing, if we spend that time upstairs, we can get into that space of self-blame, or what have I done wrong, or what am I not doing? And others will just give us a bit of perspective. They'll say, well, hang on a sec. Is that the reality? Or is it a fabricated reality?
And I feel very fortunate, and that's what I love about what we do on this podcast, because some people may not have another voice. I have the voice of my wife, and she did, kind of snap me back to reality. But the only reason she figured that out, and, because I did speak to her about it, I said, do you really think that I'm spending too much time blaming myself? And she said, yeah, I do actually, because I've heard the way you're talking over the last week. So for her, it was evidence-based in the way I was thinking it, but I didn't like the evidence she came up with, which is, you're wrong, the way you're thinking about it. But hey, I'm happy to be taught. But the truth was, my point is, I had an ear, and then she got to listen to it over a period of time, and then she realised that I was heading down the wrong track. So, that's what I love about this podcast, that I'm hoping that there's people listening now that may not, and especially when they spend so long in a truck on their own, that people aren't hearing those conversations people are having, as you said, upstairs in their head on their own. So I'd love them to hear us now to go, if you're having those thoughts and you're starting to blame yourself, I was wrong in doing so. And start to redirect your thoughts, as Arthur said, so beautifully. Where's the evidence that? If there's no evidence, start to think of other things. And having said that, by way of segue, I'll start with you, Arthur, with some coping mechanisms, if you will. What can people start to do tomorrow that might take them in a different direction to where they are today?
Yeah. Look, I think with everything going on at the moment, we're hearing it here, people are feeling a loss of control. I don't feel I have control over this, because I'm not sure what things are going to look like tomorrow, in a week's time and a month's time. And that's where things creep away from us. That's where we can get into some unhelpful thinking about the next 6 months or 4 months. Not to say we don't need to do that, but when we're consuming ourselves with that can be really unhelpful, because it takes a toll. As we've spoken about, we become fatigued, exhausted, irritable. So some practical things to do in times, I guess, of uncertainty, or we're not quite sure what things are going to look like, is to take that moment to say, okay, I'm going to think about this just for the next 30 minutes with a free flurry of thoughts, whatever they may be, but then I'm going to move into something more helpful, something that puts me in control right here, right now. So it just helps bring things a little closer, stops that worry way into the future, and can give people a greater sense of control in what's going on for them. And then you've got the broader practical things people can be doing to look after their mental health and well-being. If people are struggling to sleep a little, writing things down. We know if we take all of these thoughts from our head and put them on a bit of paper, we externalize it, which helps us process that a bit better. And even then working through some of that list and saying, what's factual, what's not. It allows us to kind of get a good sense of that when it's on paper. Can this wait till tomorrow? Do I really need to be thinking about this right now? Because sometimes we think about things that we don't really need to be thinking about today. And then there's other things we probably do in amongst all of that. So how do we just start to contain some of that thinking that can go on, and then broader self-care, making sure you're moving a lot more. That just helps physically and psychologically when we're just, when they're fueling up or stopping somewhere, just moving around the truck rather than just sitting and being a sedentary, I guess, right through to getting, having small naps, to eating healthier. I always say, each percent counts. When we're feeling that and you've got a bucket of stress, and if we're operating at 8 or 9, I'm always looking at how do I get myself to a 6? How do I get myself to a 7? I don't turn around and go, gee, I've got 9 and 10 left in me. I'll just keep moving the other way. So, how do we make sure we're constantly trying to alleviate that valve a little and take some of that pressure off?
It's such a great point you raise, Arthur, and I'm guilty of it. When you said, maybe give yourself 30 minutes to worry, something that I realised that was happening really recently, like within the last 2 weeks, was I had some stuff I was worrying about in this space, and I was at the dinner table with my family, and I was distracted in thought. And it wasn't until about kind of halfway through dinner that my wife kind of noticed I kept staring off into space. And one of my kids had asked me something, and I didn't hear it. And she's like, babe, did you hear that? And I said, oh, sorry. And it was afterwards, she said, are you still stuck in your thoughts? And I said, I was a bit. But what I realised was that I'd missed, like for a moment, I got back on track because my kids had plenty of stuff, to share with me and all that kind of stuff. And what I realised was I was about to rob myself of a family moment, or a moment. We, in our family, we measure things in moments. We've decided to make a call, and when we're all having fun and everyone's laughing, I look at my wife and go, this is a moment, which just means let's record, let's press record on this, or at least, put a bow around it and go, this is a great little memory, Talking about what people can do tomorrow, Heather, just if you've got any practical tips, only because, again, you've been in the game so long, some other things that maybe other people haven't considered, other drivers haven't considered, some things that you've been doing practically that people can do tomorrow or in the next week. Have you got any thoughts around that? You've mentioned some insurance tips there. Is there any other things that you can think of that people may not have thought of that can help them down the track?
Driving economically. Like, we've really tried that with the company that I work with as well. So one driver, we did the same run, same loads, we're doing 118 tonne each way. So he just did 90 kilometres an hour. That was it. And for one day, he saved 50 litres of fuel.
Is it 50 litres?
50 litres he saved, and that
just coming off the right foot down to 90, saved 50 litres.
And using your auxiliary brakes, like your retarders and your J brakes rather than the foot brake, and not putting your foot straight down, just gradually easing off. Yeah. So you times that by 6, then times it by $3.20, you are saving a lot of money, an awful lot of money.
I wouldn't have thought it was that much.
Yep. So 50 litres that's in a 12 hour, and it was 2 runs, fairly hilly road, but he just took his foot off the accelerator, just took it off, 90 k's, 85 in some places. And, now I know the motorists might get a little bit cheesed off, but it's a twofold thing here is if I'm doing 90 or 85 in my car, you can do 110, right? So you can get out, pass, and back in behind
in a hurry,
safely in a hurry. Whereas if I was sitting on 100 and you've got 110 to get past me, you're out on that wrong side for a long time. So it actually is safer for cars to get out and around. Other truck drivers, obviously, if they're up on the 100, they're probably company drivers. They're not paying for the fuel.
Yes.
Whereas owner drivers drive trucks completely different. And also, rather than if you've got the option of doing around town work or shorter runs, you're not clocking up your Ks for services a lot earlier and laying rubber on the road, then, if you can sort of change maybe what you're doing and concentrate on shorter runs. I know that's not an option for us, but just a few other things too.
Yeah.
And number one is just go through that bank account. I know I said it before, but there's little fees that come out, subscription fees and things that you had a look at that magazine 5 years ago and that $2 is still coming out every month, or just have a look at that because that all adds up as well. They're just the things that we've been doing, but just driving economically is huge. Like 10 to 20% of your fuel can be reduced by just driving the way. Scania designed the truck, Isuzu designed the truck, Mack and Volvo and all the others designed the truck to be driven. Not, you can't get out of a Kenworth and drive a Scania exactly the same way as you drive a Kenworth. You're going to use more fuel. Just jump online. It shows you how to be economical in your fuel use and your driving on every single truck. Jump online, have a look at there.
Is that true? So each manufacturer, if they go online, there's recommendations about, again, without causing some kind of traffic trouble, but there's ways to be economic with the way, like they've actually got some peak kind of saving and enough performance to get the job done.
And how to do it. We did a lot of training with Scanias up on a mine site and just rolling down the hill, just getting that momentum and then using that inertia to get up the other side of the hill, using your retarder each click at the time, not jamming it all the way on. All those little tiny things save fuel. Every time you touch the brake and the accelerator, you're using more fuel. So if you're just nice and steady and keep that flow, and have a little game with yourself so your head's not in that, oh my goodness, what am I doing? But just have a look, record, you can go through the computer. I get 1.4 kilometres a litre at the moment. See if you can get to 1.5. Just sort of have that little game, and that sort of takes your head out of yourself of, where we are.
Turn it into your own competition. It would be a great way to try and get a personal best on fuel consumption, you know.
Yeah.
And Arthur, moving slower, I imagine there'd be some advantage in, if you can, rather than being annoyed by taking longer to get there. And I'm hoping that people are in a situation where the schedule will allow them that freedom, because I know sometimes they've got to get a load there on time. But, let's be honest, there's a chance that loads aren't going to get there at all. So hopefully people can be flexible on the roads. If they're hearing exhaust brakes where normally they wouldn't, hopefully people can cut our drivers a bit of slack. Noticing the truck going slower, cut them a bit of slack. And as Heather said, the cars will get round them quicker. But Arthur, I imagine, is there some sort of benefit in, dare I say it, actually physically slowing down? Does that, if they're doing those kind of things, is there a way that we can get them to kind of, I don't know, find the the kind of nuances in calming down and slowing down?
When I was sitting here just listening to Heather and everything she's talking about a truck and all the practical things to do whilst driving, I'm going, equally applies from a mental health and wellbeing perspective.
Right.
If we're operating and driving at 100, you're feeling that pressure of 100. If you're personally then feeling that and you're operating at 100, how do you start to release the valve on some of those things and take some of that pressure off? So those small things around looking after yourself, your personal well-being, going for a walk around the truck, slowing down a little, enjoying that podcast or something that just brings a bit of pleasure, connecting with a colleague or a peer, right through to, hey, what can I do to alleviate some of my own intrinsic anxiety and some of the things we've already spoken to. They're all the practical things we can do. So if you combine them together, it puts us in a better place. And what I mean by combine, the practical things day to day from a driving perspective, but then also from a personal perspective. And that will just hopefully take that little bit of pressure off a little more and put you in a better place.
Talk about putting yourself in a better place. Like there's, putting yourself in a positive thought space, as we know, is sometimes easier said than done. But there can be a positive cab space too, and it's something I'm sure Heather would know. Like if we are slowing down, and as crazy as this might sound, and maybe it won't, but listening to the kind of music that does calm you, as opposed, don't get me wrong, when I take my HQ Ute out with my thumping big V8 and it's loud, and I like to get out there and hear the rumble, and I play AC/DC. I do. Without a doubt, I kind of create a scene that feels a bit rock and roll because I'm out there in my V8 and it's revving and it's loud and it's making noise and I've got loud music. Is there a benefit in creating for a healthy headspace, a healthy cab space, where if you're listening to news articles that are going to drive you mad? Let's be honest, there's not going to be a lot of great news on the news at the moment, and that thing that social media does it. If you've been on social media and you've been listening to content that makes you angry, but as a result it keeps you engaged, it just keeps delivering you that same sewer pit of information. Is there an advantage in us making sure that we try and change your mental space by changing the cabin space and play better music and listen to stuff that brings you joy, listen to a podcast that helps or takes your mind off things. Is there an advantage in doing that?
Absolutely. And I think the older you get, the more you realise this. When you're young, I think you need a little bit more education around this as well. And I've noticed, I've been a defensive driver for a long, long time. And, and everyone, if you get up late and you got 5 minutes to get to work and you are flying to get to work, what happens? Every red light, everyone will pull out in front of you. And by the time you get there, you're absolutely stressed to the max. But if you leave 20 minutes early, you just breeze into work. You've got a better head space. Nothing happens. Or if it does, it doesn't worry you because you've slowed down and you've got that time for your mind and everything else to sort of cope. I find it's excellent. If I've got a real tight deadline, that's when things start to go wrong and that's when your head gets really stressed. If you're doing 85, 90 and someone pulls out in front of you, you've got a lot more seconds to actually stop. If you're up on that 100, you're probably going to have, something go AWOL because you haven't got that extra time either. So the same thing with listening. I listen to country music and I listen to, really great podcasts, and there's so many now that are out there that are really upbuilding and encouraging.
Yeah, you'd have to be careful with country music, wouldn't you, Heather? Because, quite often they lose their car, they lose their dog, and their missus leaves them. I'd be very selective.
I like songs with stories, just not that headbanging stuff. I don't mind, good old rock and roll too. I love that as well. But there's a time and place for everything. But, I just like nice and calm and easy listening stuff keeps your mind nice and calm. And I think there's been studies done with beats and everything that actually affect your heart and makes your heart beat at a different rate and everything. So there's a big psychology sitting behind even music and what you listen to.
Arthur, is that like creating a new space for yourself or a better space to be in your tips?
Without a doubt, creating that environment where there is a level of comfort and being deliberate around that, whether that be the music you enjoy, the space you're creating around you. And I think just to add to the great ideas Heather's shared, also being deliberate around containing what you listen to and how much you listen to it. Because we know now at the moment there's, every half hour, there's a news report and an update, and it's really not too much has shifted within the hour a lot of the times.
No, it's just
consume ourselves.
Yeah, it's a repeated shit show, isn't it? It is just a repeated shit show.
So how do you say to yourself, do you know what? I'm not going to consume myself for the next 3 hours listening to talkback and a news report, and it's all on the same topic. At the moment, whether it be the war, the fuel, whatever it may be, and giving yourself a bit of reprieve, because your mind, especially if you're finding it a little more challenging where your mind wanders off, that isn't helpful. So that's, putting yourself back in the driver's seat and going, actually, I'm going to take control of this. There's certain things I can control and there's other things I can't control. The bits I can control will be how much of that information I listen to, number one. Two, is it credible information I'm listening to? And I think you were alluding to this, algorithms, social media, all of a sudden you can end up down a rabbit hole where you're going, I've just looked at things and it's been, catastrophic. And that's the world we start to create, and, being really deliberate in going, well, actually, I'm going to create the right environment for me in the cabin. I am going to break it up with a good podcast or music I enjoy. You know what? I am going to now speak to somebody that makes me laugh. Or, it's just going to alleviate a bit of that tension. I don't want to have another conversation about the same topic again. It is, again, choosing and going, when do I want to have those conversations? When don't I want to have those conversations? And just putting guardrails around that, so you can be in a much better place.
It's funny how we say rabbit hole, because I think we've said that for so long. I found myself, when you watch Peter Rabbit, the rabbit hole actually looked quite nice. I actually found myself in a sewer pit or a fox's den. I wish it was you know what I mean? When you start getting trapped on that and you're outraged by something in the phone. But again, as we know, when you're outraged, you keep staring at it and listening to it. And for those who don't know how these algorithms work, I know many people do, but if you're listening to something that gets you outraged and you listen to it for 2 or 3 minutes because you're outraged by it, that phone says they love this. They want more of this. Heather, I hope you don't mind me asking, you've been on the road, is it 35 years now that you've been a truck driver?
A bit more than that, but yeah, we'll say 35, Shane. We'll say 35, yeah.
So you started on the road when you were 5. Am I doing the right things here?
I actually did. I was in the truck with my dad when I was 4, so yeah.
You were?
I did. I did a few runs with him, yeah.
So to say it's in your blood, isn't it? I mean, it really is. As you said, like it's your dad, it's you, it's your daughters. I mean, you've got grandkids now, aren't you? Which you had at a very young age.
That I throw in the truck and take along with me as well.
For those that haven't, because you schooled your daughters in your truck, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, homeschooled them, yes. Yeah.
I know that. I know we discussed that on a podcast, but I love that story so much. I want to remind our listeners that you did this. I mean, to say that trucking's in your family is more than an understatement. I mean, you guys are trucking as far as I'm concerned. Do you find that people do open up to you a bit more on the road? Because, dare I say it, you are a mother and a grandmother, and you're a very approachable person. But you've been, dare I say it, like a female mother on the road to so many drivers in so many ways for so long. Do people open up to you probably a little bit more than they do to others? And is there something we need to say out there to knowing that not every person on the road has access to someone like you or an Arthur? Is there something you want to say to some of our male truck drivers out there to find that person they can talk to? Is that all fair to say that people do probably open up to you more than others would open up to others, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I find that a lot of the male truck drivers will just come up and have a chat. Those that know me know that everything they say is confidential, and we can talk across a lot of stories. And I really do understand and get where they're coming from because I live it every day as well. And I think that just listening to things from a female's point of view and maybe giving a little bit of advice from a mum or a nana or from how I see things may help people. If they haven't got an Arthur or someone like that or myself to sort of have a conversation with, reach out. A lot of trucking organisations have a lot of women in the office. They've got a lot of help. They've got, once again, Healthy Heads can direct you to places where you can have that conversation. But also just don't be shy. Just come up and have a chat, or whoever we are. Just have a chat because it really, really does help.
Arthur, talking about that have a chat concept and idea, I mean, having a chat's one thing, but knowing what to look for the signs in your mates. Well, I mean, if you're looking at a mate and you're good at having a chat, that's great for the communication and connection. But what are we looking for? Because I have a bit of a confession here. My dad, who's 91, he got very badly burnt in a situation, an accident, quite a few years ago, and he was in his 80s, and I'd known him all of my life, and it would be fair to say I knew my dad better than most people. And he was staying at our place after he'd recovered from these injuries. And it was a conversation with my wife where she actually, at one point, and she's been saying to me, I don't think your dad's himself. And I'm going, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I'm guilty of the question I'm about to ask you, Arthur, which is I didn't know what to look for because my dad has always been a rock. He was, number one, he was my dad. Number two, he runs a boxing gym, you know what I mean? And he's trained fighters all his life. And, this is a hardened man. And I didn't know what to spot. And my wife kept saying, I don't think he's himself. And I'm going, what are you talking about? My he's a fighter. He's a survivor. And I was talking about, dare I say it, I kept reading his bio out to my wife. I kept reading what he meant to me as a statement as to who I see him as permanently. And it was almost like I'd never considered he would change, which is a confession. And my wife was the one that sat with my dad at one point and said, Ron, I've got some questions for you. And she ran through questions that I know you would know. There's about 10 basic questions that you're supposed to ask, and I'm not sure of them in detail, but my wife knew them. And she asked him, and she said, Ron, have you ever considered that you might be depressed? After he became immobile, he was taken out of his home and put in a hospital, had to kind of learn to kind of move again and had muscular atrophy and all these things. And he answered the questions and sort of said, oh, no, I'm right. And then 10 minutes later, we were cleaning up the table and my father said, oh, Fliss, my wife's name's Felicity, Fliss, can you come back over here, darling? Can you ask me those 10 questions again? And she asked the same 10 questions. I'm watching all this from a distance going, what are they nattering about? And he answered those 10 questions this time more honestly, and then unveiled to my wife that he said, well, you know what, I think you're right. I think I might be depressed. Now, I didn't spot it in my own father, who I know better than anyone. So, long way of leading to my question again, Arthur. What are we looking for? What are people supposed to look for? And I want to hear this because I didn't spot it.
Yeah, and I think your wife did an amazing job, because you even used the key words there around noticing something different. That wasn't the exact word, but a change. That's ultimately what you're looking for. What is that change? And if you know certain individuals quite well, family members, friends, colleagues, peers, you will start to see certain shifts. So maybe they're a little more irritable now. Maybe they're looking a little more fatigued, which they don't normally. And maybe they're becoming a little more cynical. Now, I'm not talking about the person who's always cynical. That's not a change in behaviour. We're talking about the person now that's starting to shift. Their personality is starting to take a bit of a different shape. They're starting to pull away from people a bit more. The two things you'll always see first is people withdraw. When they've got stuff going on in their lives, we've spoken about this today quite a bit, they turn insular. So you're thinking, you're distracted, you're thinking about, okay, when am I going to get finance? What's it going to look like? So we start to pull away from people. And they're probably your first cues. You'll start to see people doing more of that. So if you're noticing that change, it's a great opportunity to do that check-in and highlight that to people, which your wife did really well. So you're coming in saying, look, I've just seen something a bit out of character. You're normally like this, and now I'm seeing this today. You normally like catching up for a coffee. I haven't seen that the last couple of weeks. Or you just seemed, like you're carrying a lot. There's a lot of frustration there. Is everything okay? I don't normally see that. So what I'm trying to do is highlight to the person my observation of change. But I'm always doing that in a really respectful way. And that is always through that lens of care and compassion. I truly care about you. And the compassion's the demonstration of behaviour. And with that, I'm here to support you. The care's the empathy bit connected to that. The compassion is the demonstration of behaviour. So I can see you've got a lot going on. It's looking a bit different. How do I, support you? What do you need? And that can lead into the conversation. But your first cues will be isolation, maybe a little more distracted. People forget a bit more because they're consumed with what's going on. Then you start to see a bit more of the fatigue kicking in, probably because they're maybe sleeping less or, waking up at various points throughout the night. Maybe worrying more. There's constant worry. You're hearing those words of worry constantly that are playing out. So they're just some of the immediate cues. And then clearly they can start to escalate. So irritability can change to anger.
Right.
That frustration or slight worry can really start to shift towards more of that pessimistic outlook on life, which is just amplified a little more. That withdrawal and isolation is exacerbated further. So we're just looking for those shifts in those signs and symptoms. So, maybe the person's pulled away and said today, I don't feel like catching up. I'm feeling a bit flat. But now it's a week. Now it's 2 weeks. So that is starting to show some of those signs and cues, and they're things we can look out for within ourselves, but equally others around us as well. And the best thing we can do, and I think we've all touched on it, is just to say, hey, how are you going? And start that conversation. There's a lot going on. I always bring a little bit of self into that. Look, there's a lot going on. I'm feeling some of the worries and the pressures. How are you going with it all? It just helps normalise it. Then I've started off with a level of normalisation to allow that person to open up a little bit. And this is something all truckies can connect with. They're all going through the same thing. So starting that conversation with, gee, it's a bit tough at the moment. I'm feeling it.
Yeah, that'll be. What a great kind of, dare I say it, chorus for us to teach truck drivers to sing to each other, which is, man, it's tough on me.
Yeah.
It's got to be tough on you too. How are you finding? I mean, that is what a great intro, Arthur. Because I'm, being a man, sometimes, like I said, I didn't spot it in my own father. And confession, you don't want to, go. Sometimes out of nowhere, it feels. You're right. It feels weird to go out of nowhere. Are you okay? Because then they go, "Why? I seem okay, don't I?" And they could be offended, whatever. What a great way to do it. I've never thought of it that way, to go, I'm feeling it. It's really tough on me. Yeah. I imagine it must be tough on you also. Yes. How are you going with it? Because I'm feeling it. And at that point, I guess the door is open, isn't it?
Yeah.
To have that chat.
It's the normalization of it, because most people, am I the one thinking about this in a way that isn't normal? Am I the odd one out? And the moment we introduce it that way, it starts to normalize, and it really can start to open up that conversation. And especially being in more male-dominated environments, you're not starting with how are you feeling.
No.
You're just going, stuff's pretty shit at the moment, or crap. Or think of choice of words here. But and people go, okay, I get that. Now I can start to talk about that. And it doesn't always have to be emotional. It could be, gee, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of pressure. I mean, that's enough for someone to share they're feeling it. And
plus, of all the countries to be in, man, because let's not forget, we go, g'day, mate, there you going? And you know what our answer is? Yeah, not too bad, mate, not too bad, which already identifies, even when we're great, bad, but not too bad. It's so hard to figure out in this country where everyone is, because our measure of good starts at bad. Yeah, I'm not too bad, mate. Yourself? Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. So apparently everyone's bad. Like that's our terrible. That's our baseline is bad, but not too bad. And we know that means apparently they're good. So it's a hard country to get a measure in, isn't it?
And I might just add to that, not being afraid to circle back and ask the question again, because we've got our scripted response, whether it's not bad or good. And that's just our default scripted response. And then pausing for a moment and then even following up with, how are you really going on?
To your point, and my confession, as I've told you, that I didn't spot that my dad actually was depressed. My dad didn't know he was depressed. So that's two of us in the one story. Both didn't know he was depressed. And it was my wife that I said had asked him the 10 questions. He answered them with what he thought, I don't know, suited the moment. I don't know. I've never asked him. Maybe I should. And then it was him that thought about it and then said, actually, come back here, love. Now, he feels very safe with my wife, of course, because they're very close. And she adores him, and that all that helps, I imagine. And she's non-judgmental. She's a genius with this stuff, and not unlike Heather, everyone feels like they can talk to my wife, And so, but it was my dad that called her back and said, actually, let's go through that list again. So even he had to go through it the second time to find the real answer. Arthur, I know, when we're talking about the financial weight of what's going on at the moment on our transport workers, can you explain your thoughts around the spreadsheet that people don't think that correlates to other things where they should be getting help? Can you explain that theory? Because I loved it.
So when they're thinking about the financial component, clearly, and that is a significant one, and there's practical things people put in place and try to put in place as well within the sphere of control around that. But sometimes don't connect it to mental health. So when they're thinking about the financial, they're thinking, what are the practical things? Do I need to go speak to my financial advisor, insurance, all of these really great strategies? But what they can miss sometimes is the connection to the mental health component or accessing support. This is financial, therefore I don't need counselling because this is a financial issue. But what we know, when people are experiencing financial strain, it has an adverse impact on mental health. And often counselling support services like Beyond Blue or the Healthy Heads website can be great resources to be thinking about, I'm experiencing this financial strain, which is having also an impact on my mental health. And these services, counselling support services, are there for that component. They may not give you financial advice, which you would go to your financial advisor or insurer, just some of the examples that were given earlier, but I can go to a counsellor or support service to think about how I look after myself through that. Because if that's not right, it's going to make it very, very difficult. But for some reason, throughout my whole career, I often find people find, financial and counselling quite separate. Oh, you don't get counselling for financial, yes, but it's having an adverse impact on your well-being. So you need to get on top of that.
Yeah. Heather, you said before, I'm going to put a heading over this, which is, don't carry it alone. To use a transport term. You said earlier that, a problem shared is a problem halved. And I truly believe in that. Talking mate to mate, I assume, you're kind of, when I say fortunate, I think you've got your daughters in your business, don't you, Heather, from memory? And you've got them to talk to, and I'm sure they come to you for advice. But are you talking mate to mate, to other drivers at the moment? Do you find that when you're talking to mates about it, and even if they're going through the same struggles, that you find just talking about it does make you feel a touch lighter?
Yeah, it does, because you can share the little bits of information that you've found that helps you. And also, I think we really do need to be careful too that we personally don't take on too much of a load from everyone else as well. If you've got 40 phone calls a day, that might get a little bit too much, but to just reach out to other people and just let them know. And I think what you said earlier and what your wife said is really, really important. And my girls and I discussed this yesterday. It's not your fault.
Yeah.
If your business has got issues now, it's not your fault. It's out of everybody's hands. And, every single one of us is going through the same thing at the moment. So we can talk to each other and share all these little gems, and even just, last week when we were at the Healthy Heads board meeting, Wayne Swash was there, and he said, how do you want to greet people? And we all stood up and we were given 6 lists. Do you want a hug? Do you want knuckles? Do you want a handshake? Do you want to say g'day? And the list that he gave us was really good, and nearly every single one in that room, so a lot of it was senior managers, gave each other a hug.
Oh.
So you can really see what this has been, how this effect of just this fuel issue has even gone right to the top of the leadership chain as well.
Can I ask you both, because I wasn't present in that meeting, was the suggestion or the reality that 6 months ago people would have just shook hands?
Yeah. That suggestion didn't come out, but I feel, what do you think, Arthur? I think it would have been that, but it was really remarkable to me, because, sort of we're big tough truckies, that those people, and it was just, I might just send you a little screenshot later. Like, I think it's probably a really good idea to have that in this podcast and say, here's an option how you want to greet your mates, in these tough times. Just say, hey, do you want a knuckles? Do you want a handshake? How are you really feeling? Do you need a hug?
Yeah, what would be a great way to ask it. I mean, this is how a podcast works. You're allowed to pose it. We're allowed to suggest it now that you do say to mates, like literally that. How do you want to be greeted? Like, hey, mate, good to see you. How do you want to be greeted, mate? What are you after? A handshake, high five, a hug, conversation, fist pump, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Do you need a 5-minute chat, or do you need to sit down for 15 and really get something off your chest? I mean, let's just say that, because. And Arthur, can I ask you, was that the inference that in fact 6 months ago most people wouldn't have needed a hug, but now they definitely do?
Yeah, and what it's highlighting is the importance of connection. It's the highest form of well-being. I mean, it's everything we're talking about today. And I know I love pulling out stats, but 50% of a person's well-being is attributed to connection.
50%.
And the other 25 is usually activity, well-being, just doing the right things, exercise, food, sleep, looking after oneself. And the final 25 is psychological intervention. I mean, I'm not talking about chronic mental health conditions, but, where people are feeling it a bit tough or their mental health's being compromised a little. They're probably in that languishing kind of space, connecting, because the first thing we do is pull away from people. When we have stuff going on, I mean, you were sharing a chain, you're in another world when you're at the dinner table, or the kids, you turn insular, and it's about forcing self into that space of connection, because ultimately we're a tribe, we're a village, we're still wired in our primitive way, and just being around each other, speaking to someone, whether it be a hug, a fist pump, or, a sitting down, that is quite therapeutic, and it doesn't always have to be focused strictly on the mental health. It could be a yarn, it could be a joke, it could be a bit of music, or it could be something deeper. a conversation about what's actually going on for somebody and being deliberate around asking some of that. But that in and of itself is a big contributor to a person's well-being. They're the first things I look at. I mean, you look at even things like Alzheimer's and it's the isolation. That is the biggest driver of,
Is it?
Yeah, because that's what starts to happen. We isolate. We saw it during COVID. Isolation exacerbated mental health conditions, right through to health conditions. So how do we just bring that back at a time when things are a little tougher? Or be more deliberate again in that.
Arthur, there's that. I hope I'm not being too dramatic, but I'll use a couple of analogies. Once it stopped raining for a week, like in summer, the old thing was once it stopped raining for a week, the drought has already started, as in until it rains next, the ground is already drying up. And there's that thing, as soon as you feel a little bit thirsty, the process of dehydration has already begun. And the reason I say those as an analogy, I assume if people are already at the point where instead of a handshake, they're already going, actually, I'd already like a hug, then is it fair to assume that already the pressure is having an effect on them personally, mentally, emotionally, as well as physically, financially, all the rest of it? But in fact, the process has already begun of people need to be aware they're already feeling the effect of this. It's not going in the right direction. It's heading towards south instead of north. And what I'm getting to is, do people need to be aware not to wait too long? As we know, if you wait too long in a drought and don't start looking for water, you're going to run out. Like, is there a warning or a heads up we can give, an early traffic signal to say to them, don't wait too long to start to seek some kind of help, connection, or conversation?
Yeah, I like to use a bit of a barometer or a jar. 10, let's say you got the barometer 0 to 10. 10, you've blown a head gasket. You've completely fallen apart. 0, you're kind of on a holiday, sunbed. You're quite ineffective, but relaxed. And we know somewhere in the middle is your optimum. We actually need a bit of stress in life, because if I'm at 0 on a holiday, I've eaten breakfast and I'm spending 3 hours thinking about what I'm going to have for lunch.
Or like it's 1980 in the western suburbs of Melbourne where I was, and you're a stoner.
But when you've got a bit of that pressure, that 4, 5, and 6, it gives you motivation. It gives you drive. You're kind of in that space where things feel effortless. You back yourself. There's a level of confidence. All the kind of good chemicals are being released. But then as we start to creep into the 7s, 8s, and 9s, cortisol, adrenaline kicks in. It's that fight-flight mode, which is the real unhelpful space. So a really simple strategy is to go, okay, what does optimum look like for you? And it'll be different for everyone, but let's say it's around that 5, 6 number. Have that as the marker. Kind of go recognize, okay, am I at 7 now? Am I at 8? Maybe I need to look at a few things to bring me back down to 6, not keep moving up to 8, 9, and 10 and filling it with the more unhelpful stuff. So that's that awareness piece. It's a bit like the temperature gauge or the petrol gauge in the truck. You're not waiting for it to be in that red flashing, empty space. You're kind of going, okay, I've got to, I'm a quarter of the way before empty. I think I need to start thinking about what I need to do at the next stop, fill up, look after the truck, not waiting for it to be empty and be in crisis, because that's what you're going to be at that point in time. The truck stops and you've got nothing left, and then you're pulling everything in to kind of sort that issue out. And it's equally the same from a mental health perspective. So I'm always looking at, okay, if my mark is 6 every day, that's where I want to be. If I get to a 7 or 8, what's the helpful thing I can do right now? Gee, I actually feel like talking to you, Shane. You'll put a bit of a smile on my face, or Heather, I'd love to have a bit of a chat with you around, what are some things I could be doing to look after myself? What are some of those ideas? Or I just need to eat well, or I just need to have a bit of rest. And that just helps alleviate some of that pressure.
Talking to people that put a smile on your face, Heather, I know, not that we've discussed it in this podcast, but I think you've said in the past it's time to be a good mate again. Can you explain what, in your mind, that looks like? What does that look like to be a good mate to other mates?
Well, even that simple wave through the window, that's that connection with a person going past you. But if someone's I think it was yesterday, I had a trainee with me and we pulled into a truck stop and there was 3 other truck drivers there that had just pulled up across the road. So we just sort of said, hey, how you going? How are you travelling? How are you doing today? Oh, yeah, not too bad. Just those conversations that sometimes in the last 10 years we've been so busy that we just don't do that anymore. I think it's time to just pull up, have a real big breath and say, we are the only people out on the road now. We're really, really doing it really tough. We need to look out for each other. Our brother and sister truckers, that's what I say. We've really got to look after each other. If someone's broken down and needs to change tyre, just stop. Stop. Call your booking people and say, look, mate, there's someone on the side of the road, I'm stopping. And just get back to being how we were before, how good mates. I remember you saying that you ran out of fuel once and you were trying to get to a gig and some guys came and gave you fuel.
In Queensland, I pulled into the silo. They were doing night loads. Yeah, they were doing night loads out of a silo in the middle of nowhere. When I said I was out of fuel, could I buy some off them? Yeah, they said, no, you can't buy it off us, but we'll give you some. And they were adamant, like, no, mate, if you're stuck, this is, and they said, this, mate, you're in Queensland, mate. I'd like to think it would happen in every state, but I've got to give him credit because they were his words. I can't rewrite his script because he was running the show, I was the guy with no fuel and he was the guy with heaps of it. And he just said, mate, you're in Queensland, mate. We don't leave anyone behind. And I only needed probably, 50 litres, maybe 60 litres to get to where I was trying to get to. I was out. And had 100 easy couple, probably 150k to go, and they filled me up, And this is obviously before the fuel crisis, but that was I was overjoyed with that spirit for someone just to be a mate, and I think something you touched on there, Heather, would be fantastic for us to infect people's thoughts with is that if you get out of a truck and you see a fellow transport worker or truck driver that you don't know, to just walk over. As you've said, it is being proven now that our team, our truck driving family on the road are hurting, and they're in it. We're all in it, particularly you guys who are driving every day. You're all in it more than usual because now there's even more pressure and you're doing the same job. So, that's the grand, in sport, it's a great thing. Oh, this is really tough because it's the big game before the grand final. That lifts someone's spirits. But we've got the opposite here, I imagine, Arthur, if I'm not wrong in saying so. There's extra pressure without the reward. So I think the one thing that makes teams play well is when they're on a team where each other's got each other's back. So I think what a great thing to infect the minds of our beautiful drivers out there who are feeling at the moment. Well, imagine if we can catch the person that no one's checked in on because out of nowhere we randomly walk over at a servo and go, how you going, mate? And we catch that one person that has had no one ask them that. And Arthur, I imagine connection can come from a stranger. Am I right in saying that?
Oh, without a doubt. It doesn't have to be a known person. It could be, I think you were sharing, Heather, just saying that hello or to a stranger, right through to recognising it's a peer or another truckie and going, hey, how are you going? And just being deliberate around that because we just don't know what's happening in people's lives and being able to be there for each other.
Heather, I've got to ask, when you've done that, just in case someone's listening now going, oh, look, that's a great idea. But let's be honest, not all our truck drivers are necessarily the most outgoing people. They're kind of tough and ready, but they're not always the most outgoing personality-wise, you know what I mean, to walk up to a stranger and have a chat. I do that, but I'm that kind of personality type. Just through your eyes, Heather, when you've walked up to someone and just said, look, I'm just want to check on you, say how you're going, how have you found that reception?
High percentage want to have a chat. A high percentage do, yeah. And if you're not like you, Shane, really gregarious and happy and out there, everyone's got a two-way. Everyone's got a two-way. Yeah. And if you're at the back blocks and everything, there's a lot of people who aren't too shy to talk on that two-way. Hey, g'day, mate. How you going? Are you okay? Are you really okay? How are you? Do you want to stop? Do you want to have a chat? Look, I went past this little market and it had watermelons and rock melons in it. So I pulled my truck in and I pulled over and I grabbed a rock melon, a watermelon and threw it in the truck. And I didn't give it to anyone, but I had it there because I thought, imagine if we pulled up waiting to be loaded and I could chop this watermelon up and just share that. just to sort of think outside the square. I brought it home to the grandkids, but anyhow, like just to look at something different. Like I really, really think we can make a change right now in this really difficult time by just saying, "How are you? Do you need a coffee?" Or it's only a couple of dollars. It's just a small investment of our time, and you get the rewards for it too, because the conversation and the things they say, and sometimes they'll say, "Oh, thanks so much for just saying g'day," and like you're both benefiting from it. Sometimes you yourself benefit more than that poor person that might not even have had someone say good and check in on them in that day.
Well, it's that theory that if people understand in tough times, there's that old theory that a sip of water in a drought is far more appreciated than 10,000 litres in the rain. So you don't have to turn up with 10,000 litres in the rain. Yeah. You don't have to do that then because it's running. But with just one sip of water in the drought is something people will never forget. And it's the small things that make the difference. So, Heather, I've got a question for you. We're sort of coming to the end of our time here on the podcast. And Arthur, I'm going to ask the same of you in a moment. You're both in a rare position that we're in this very uncertain time, and we've found ourselves in a scenario that none of us saw coming, obviously with the fuel crisis. And the rare situation you're in is that you're here and able to speak to our drivers and warehouse workers right at the moment that are on the road. Heather, you're one of them. You're one of the people hurting. You're one of our drivers that does this for a living, and it's affecting the way you live, I imagine, and your daughters are in the business and you've got people that work with you. You've been in the game for a very long while. You've got a chance to talk to our fellow drivers on the road. What do you want to say to them right now?
Just don't take everything on board straight away. Just really step back, take a breath, put into place what Arthur said too. Like, we will get over this, and, down the track in a year or two, we'll look back and we'll say, wow, we were pretty tough back then. We got through it. Just look, and I think, talk to people. Just talk, and if you need to pull up and stop and have a sleep, I find that if I'm really, really stressed out, pull over and have a 20-minute nap in the bunk. That's why we've got it behind our truck. Pull over, jump in there, have a nap, and then you can just see things differently. And another thing, clean your cab up. Like, just make it nice and clean. A messy mind, a messy place needs a messy mind. If you have a nice clean place, it helps with your mental health as well. And I found that that's really good. I've washed all my rugs and my sheets and everything, and it smells nice and looks nice, and that helps with your mental health as well. But just say g'day, reach out to each other, support each other more than you can ever possibly in the past. Do it right now, because we all really, really need each other.
And Arthur, the same for you. There's so many people now who don't get the opportunity to get to talk to, and I'm hoping in the very near future, if they need someone like you, they will reach out. But while we've got the advantage of having you on our podcast, what would you say to our truck drivers out there? I mean, some of them probably thinking they can just push right through, and maybe they shouldn't. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, very sound advice, Heather, as well. So I'm going to echo some of those sentiments. But just as you would look after your truck, make sure you're giving time to look after yourself through that. Connect with your peers, friends, loved ones on the road or when you're at home. And also think about accessing professional support where possible, whether that's organisations like Beyond Blue, Lifeline. There are plenty of resources out there to be able to draw on. So strongly encourage doing that sooner rather than later. And probably the big one is, that sphere of control we were talking about earlier, thinking about what am I in control of, what am I not in control of, and how much time do I need to give myself, how much time do I give consuming myself with this. So do I have control over what's happening, yes or no? And if the answer is no, do I need to be thinking about it right now? Probably not. What can I do that's going to be helpful for me right now to make it a little better? And that can just put people into a better headspace.
I've been saying it over the last few weeks quite a lot. Trucks do keep Australia moving, and it's been a slogan, it's been a bumper sticker. It's the kind of thing that people in the transport industry say. But the only thing to come out of this that I can see as any kind of real positive is the fact that Australia now know proof positive that expression we know so well is in fact not a slogan. It's not a saying, it's a fact. And I just hope when we get, as we've said a couple of times, this will end. We don't know quite when. We will get through this one way or the other. So, if I can leave people with one thing, which is my confession, I can be a host on a podcast about mental health. It doesn't make me an expert, and it certainly doesn't mean I've got it right in the past. In fact, it's the opposite. I've got it wrong in the past, and I'm no expert at all. So I'm along for this ride, if you will, on this podcast as much as everyone listening. Heather and Arthur, I can't thank you enough. I'm going to have a crack at it, but I can't thank you enough. Heather, I know how busy you are at the moment trying to deal with a fuel crisis and run a business and be a mum and a grandma and be on the road during these trying times. Thank you so much again for coming on and offering some help. Thank you, mate.
Absolute pleasure. Absolutely. Yeah.
And Heather, look after yourself. We're thinking of you. And Arthur, again, thank you so much. You have such a great way of being able to casually and calmly kind of get straight to the crux of how people feel and what they should do about it. I get to speak to many people on different podcasts, and sometimes when they finish their advice, I go, I'm not even sure what to make of that. But with yours, I always understand it. So thank you so much for being able to get straight to it so quickly. It's brilliant to have you as part of the podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
No, pleasure's been ours. Well, I will do my outro now, which is just to say I am Shane Jacobson, and this is How You're Travelling from Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds. We've called this one Under the Pump because that's how a lot of people out there are feeling right now, as we've just discussed. If something's weighing on you, don't wait until it gets on top of you. Head to Healthy Heads website for practical tools and a full list of free, confidential support options. We've also included those links in this episode's notes. And one more thing I'll say to end off this podcast is something that was actually written, if I'm not mistaken, by Heather's daughters, which is: keep your fuel caps tight, your right foot light, and make sure your brother and sister truckies are doing all right. Did I get that right, Heather?
Oh, you nailed it, Shane. Nailed it. Thank you.
Well, I didn't. Your daughters did. So please thank them for that. Take care out there. And as I've said halfway through the podcast, Australia now knows what we've always known. You do keep Australia moving. Take care.